The council chamber was filled with panic. Ambassador Velthara stood in the center of the massive hall, her crystal body shaking as she showed images of destroyed worlds. Her people, the Riltans, had watched 17 of their colony systems disappear in just 2 years. The enemy was called the Swarm, and it moved through space like a plague, eating everything in its path. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 50 different alien species watched in horror. The holographic images showed planets stripped bare of all life, space stations torn apart, entire fleets reduced to floating debris. The Swarm was not just an army. It was a force of nature, unstoppable and hungry. Velthara's voice trembled as she spoke through the translation devices. We have lost millions of our people. The Corvan Empire sent their battle fleets to stop them, all destroyed. The Tessian Alliance, the greatest military power in our galaxy, sent 3 full battle groups. None returned. At this rate, the Swarm will reach the core worlds in less than 2 years. Our civilization will end. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some wanted to evacuate and run deeper into unexplored space. Others insisted on building a massive defensive line, though no one knew if it would hold. The Quellan representative, a logical creature named Tormus, kept calculating the odds on his datapad. Every simulation showed the same result: extinction. It was Velthara who finally said what everyone had been avoiding. What about the humans? Silence fell like a heavy blanket. Every species in the chamber knew about humans, though most had never met one. They were the newcomers, the strange ones who had joined the galactic community only 37 years ago. Their planet Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world. Such planets were supposed to be uninhabitable, too dangerous for intelligent life to evolve. But humans had not just survived on Earth, they had conquered it. Their planet had crushing gravity that would break the bones of most species. Its weather could shift from frozen wastelands to burning deserts in hours. Predators hunted at every level of the food chain. Diseases and parasites attacked constantly. Even the plants were often poisonous. Yet humans had climbed to the top of that nightmare world and then reached for the stars. Tormus pulled up the human military file on the chamber's main display. The numbers were not impressive. Humanity possesses approximately 200 warships. Their weapons technology is at least 3 generations behind our current standard. Their largest vessel is smaller than a Corvan destroyer. Their tactical experience is limited to conflicts within their own star system. I do not understand what they could contribute to this crisis. But desperation makes people consider impossible options. After hours of debate, the council voted to send an ambassador to Earth. They chose Captain Jiwan, a diplomatic officer who had met humans before during trade negotiations. She commanded a small diplomatic vessel called Swift Mercy. As her ship left the station and jumped into faster-than-light travel toward the Sol system, Jiwan wondered if she was flying toward salvation or wasting precious time. The journey took 5 days. When Swift Mercy arrived at Earth's orbital space, Jiwan was surprised by what she saw. Human space stations were built like fortresses, covered in armor plating and defensive weapons. Even their civilian stations looked ready for war. A human patrol ship approached and guided her to the main military station orbiting their moon. Admiral Hyunwoo met her at the docking port. He was an older human with gray streaks in his dark hair and a mechanical arm that replaced his real one. Scars marked his face, evidence of violence in his past. But his eyes were kind and he smiled warmly as he greeted her. Captain Jiwan, welcome to Luna Station. We received your emergency transmission. Our defense council is already assembled and waiting. Jiwan presented the council's plea over the next 3 days. She showed them everything. The images of destroyed worlds, the tactical data from failed battles, the projections showing the Swarm's unstoppable advance. Human military officers watched in silence, their faces unreadable. She explained that the galaxy needed help, that every military force had failed, that extinction was approaching. On the 4th day, Admiral Hyunwoo called her to the command center. The room was filled with tactical displays showing ship movements across human space. Military officers moved between stations, their voices calm and efficient. Hyunwoo stood at the center, studying a holographic map of the galaxy. Captain Jiwan, he said, turning to face her, please transmit the following message to your council.
Humanity accepts this mission.
Our first expeditionary fleet will deploy within 7 days. Jiwan felt her breathing organs tighten with confusion. Admiral, I must speak honestly. Our intelligence shows you have perhaps 200 warships. The Swarm has already destroyed thousands of vessels. Your technology is not as advanced as ours, and we failed. I do not understand how you can succeed where we could not." The Admiral's face transformed into that strange human expression called a smile, where they showed their teeth. It looked aggressive to most species, but Jiwan had learned it often meant happiness or confidence. "Captain, you are counting our strength incorrectly. We do not measure our power just by counting ships." "Then how do you measure it?" Jiwan asked. Hyunwoo gestured to the displays around them, showing human ships, bases, and defense platforms. "We measure it by determination, by refusal to surrender, by the simple fact that we evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every single day, and we are still here. The swarm has never faced Earth before. They have never faced a species that learned to fight before they learned to walk. Tell your council we are coming." As Jiwan prepared to leave, she watched human ships beginning to gather near the moon. They looked different from galactic standard vessels, bulkier and covered in heavy armor. They looked less like elegant ships and more like weapons designed to survive hell itself. She sent her report to the council, ending with words she barely believed herself. "The Deathworlders are coming. They may be our last hope." The gathering at Luna shipyards was unlike anything Jiwan had ever witnessed. The council had asked her to stay as their observer, to watch the human military prepare and report back on their capabilities. What she saw in the following week changed everything she thought she knew about warfare. The first thing that surprised her was the flagship. The Indomitable was massive, easily twice the size of any human vessel in their official records. Commander Minji, the ship's executive officer, gave Jiwan a tour of the vessel. As they walked through the corridors, Minji explained the design philosophy. "Most species build ships for maximum efficiency," Minji said, pointing to the triple-layered hull. "You make them fast, light, and powerful. We build ours assuming everything will break. See these power cores? We have 3 of them. If 2 fail, we can still fight. Every major system has backup systems, and those backups have their own backups." Jiwan examined the thick armor plating. It seemed excessive, adding weight that would slow the ship down. "Why so much armor? Does it not make you an easier target?" Minji smiled that human smile. "On Earth, we learned a hard lesson over thousands of years of warfare. In battle, something always goes wrong. Equipment fails. People make mistakes. The enemy surprises you. So we build our ships to survive the worst possible day. We call it over-engineering, and it has saved countless lives." The ship's interior reflected the same philosophy. Blast doors every 20 meters could seal off sections if the hull was breached. Medical stations were scattered throughout instead of centralized. Ammunition was stored in small separated compartments instead of large magazines. Everything was designed to keep fighting even when damaged. The crew fascinated Jiwan even more than the ship. She met Lieutenant Taeyang, a young pilot who looked barely old enough to be in the military. He showed her his fighter craft, a small and nimble vessel covered in weapons. The cockpit was cramped and uncomfortable by galactic standards. "My grandmother fought in the Unification Wars," Taeyang said proudly, running his hand along the fighter's hull. "Back when humans were still fighting each other before we went to space. She told me stories about battles where victory seemed impossible, but humans kept fighting anyway. She said we are too stubborn to know when we are beaten. I think she was right." Other pilots gathered around, all young and eager. They joked with each other, laughed freely, showed no fear of the coming battle. Jiwan could not understand it. Did they not realize they were flying toward almost certain death? But as she listened to them talk, she began to understand. They were not ignorant of the danger. They simply refused to let fear control them. The most shocking revelation came when she met Colonel Yunji and her Marines. Jiwan watched 15,000 soldiers boarding assault carriers, loading weapons and equipment. She had to ask the obvious question. "Colonel, why do you need ground soldiers for a space battle? There are no planets to invade where we are going." Yunji was a scarred woman with hard eyes and a confident manner. She smiled at the question. "Ambassador, we bring Marines because sometimes you need to board the enemy's ship. Sometimes you need to fight them face to face in their corridors and their rooms. That is when you need warriors, not just ships." Jiwan watched the Marines train in large chambers where gravity could be adjusted. They practiced fighting in zero gravity, in high gravity, in conditions that would kill most species. Their weapons were mostly kinetic projectiles, guns that fired physical bullets instead of energy beams. When she asked why, Sergeant Daehyun explained while cleaning his rifle. "Energy weapons are good," he said. but they can be blocked by shields, absorbed by certain materials, or reflected. A bullet does not care about your shields. It follows physics. If it hits you with enough force, you go down. It is simple and reliable. Humans like simple and reliable. Throughout the week, more ships arrived. Carriers filled with fighters, destroyers bristling with railguns, cruisers designed for close combat, support vessels carrying supplies for months of operations. The human fleet was not elegant or beautiful like galactic ships. It looked brutal and functional, designed by a species that understood war intimately. On the 6th day, Jiwan attended a briefing where human officers discussed tactics. They talked about acceptable casualty rates, about sacrifice plays, about fighting at distances so close that both sides would suffer terrible damage. It was a brutal and honest discussion that made her uncomfortable. Galactic militaries tried to minimize losses to fight safely from long range. Humans seemed to accept that people would die and planned accordingly. Admiral Hyunwoo entered the briefing room and everyone fell silent. He looked at the gathered officers, then at the tactical displays showing the fleet's assembly. "I know what you are all thinking," he said quietly. "You are thinking we are outnumbered. You are thinking we are outgunned. You are thinking the odds are against us. You are right about all of it." He paused, letting the words sink in. "But the swarm has never faced Earth. They have never fought a species that evolved in hell and called it home. They think numbers and firepower are everything. They are about to learn what humans do when we fight for something that matters. We are going to show them that Deathworlders do not surrender. We do not run. We fight until we win or until there is nothing left to fight with." The room erupted in cheers and shouts. The human officers banged their fists on tables, their faces showing fierce determination. Jiwon felt a chill run through her body. She was watching a species that had evolved through constant warfare, and they were about to bring that violence to an enemy that had never experienced it. On the 7th day, the fleet departed. 300 ships lit their engines and began the journey to the frontier. Jiwon sent her report to the council. "The human fleet is not like anything we have ever seen. They are not advanced. They are not elegant. But they are terrifying. They have accepted that many of them will die and they are going anyway. I do not know if they will succeed, but I believe they will fight harder than any force the galaxy has ever witnessed." The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kessian cluster. Jiwon stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. What she saw made her want to run and hide. The swarm was everywhere. Thousands of bioships filled the space around the mining colonies. They looked like living creatures with hulls that pulsed and glowed with strange lights. Some were small, the size of fighters. Others were massive, bigger than the largest human battleships. They moved in perfect coordination, like a school of fish or a flock of birds. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Admiral," Commander Junho said from his tactical station, his voice steady despite what they faced. "I count approximately 4,600 enemy vessels. We are outnumbered more than 20 to 1. Admiral Hyunwoo studied the display with calm eyes. He did not look worried or afraid. He looked focused. "Numbers are not everything." Captain Soyeon moved the fleet into attack formation Delta 7. "All ships prepare for close engagement." Jiwon felt confused. Close engagement? Most space battles happened at ranges of thousands of kilometers, where ships fired energy weapons at each other from safe distances. But Hyunwoo was ordering his fleet to move closer. She looked at Tactical Officer Yerem, who noticed her confusion. "Humans fight differently than other species," Yerem explained quietly. "We learned naval combat in our own solar system, fighting each other before we met you. Our weapons work best at close range. We call it knife fighting distance. It is dangerous for everyone, but we are better at it than most." The swarm noticed the human fleet and began moving toward them. The bioships accelerated with disturbing grace, their organic engines leaving trails of strange energy. Then they opened fire. Bright beams of concentrated energy lanced across space, striking the human ships. Alarms began blaring throughout the Indomitable. "Shields down to 68%, Yerem reported. "Hull armor holding at 92%. More beams struck. The ship shook with each impact, but the thick armor absorbed the damage. Jiwon realized that the over-engineering Minji had shown her was already saving lives. A normal galactic ship would have been crippled by now. The Indomitable just kept moving forward. "Return fire," Hyunwoo ordered. "Target the large one in the center." The Indomitable's railguns fired. These were not energy weapons but magnetic accelerators that launched solid metal slugs at incredible speeds. The projectiles crossed the distance in seconds and slammed into the target swarm ship. The impact was devastating. The bioship's hull ruptured, spraying frozen organic matter into space. It began tumbling, clearly dead or dying, but 3 more swarm ships moved forward to replace it. They fired continuously and the human ships fired back. Space became a storm of energy beams and kinetic projectiles. Ships on both sides began taking serious damage. "Launch all fighters," Captain Soyon commanded. "Execute attack pattern Reaper." The carriers opened their bays and hundreds of small fighters poured out. Lieutenant Taeyang led his squadron directly into the swarm formation. Jiwon watched on the tactical display as the tiny human fighters dove between the massive bioships, moving so fast and unpredictably that the enemy could not track them effectively. "This is Taeyang," his voice came over the communications. Breaking into attack run. "All wings, follow me in." The fighters unleashed their weapons. Missiles streaked toward their targets and rotary cannons spat streams of bullets. Wherever they struck, swarm ships died. The small bioships were torn apart by the sustained fire. Even the larger vessels suffered damage as the fighters concentrated their attacks on critical points. But the swarm was learning. Smaller organisms began detaching from the motherships, creatures that could move through space without vessels. They were about the size of a human, with many legs and sharp appendages. They swarmed toward the fighters like insects. "I have got 4 of them on my tail," Taeyang shouted. "No, 6 now. They are everywhere." "All fighters break formation and go evasive," his squadron leader ordered. The space battle became chaotic. Human fighters twisted and turned, trying to shake off the pursuing organisms. Some succeeded. Others were not so lucky. Jiwon watched helplessly as one fighter was overwhelmed by the creatures, its hull torn open. The pilot's signal went dead. Meanwhile, the capital ships pressed forward. The Indomitable fired its railguns again and again, the weapons so hot they glowed red. Other human ships did the same. The swarm lost dozens of vessels, then hundreds, but they kept coming, seemingly endless. Then something changed. Several swarm ships broke through the defensive fire and reached the Indomitable. They attached themselves to the hull and began cutting through with some kind of bioacid. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. "Hull breach on deck 7, someone shouted. "Enemy organisms entering the ship." Colonel Yunji was already moving. She and her Marines had been waiting for exactly this situation. They rushed to deck 7, their armor sealed and weapons ready. Jiwon followed at a safe distance, her curiosity overcoming her fear. The corridors of deck 7 had become a war zone. Swarm organisms poured through the breach in the hull, chitinous creatures with too many legs and razor-sharp claws. They moved fast, incredibly fast, but the Marines were ready. "Hold this line," Yunji roared. "Nothing gets past us." The Marines opened fire. Their automatic weapons filled the corridor with bullets, a continuous stream of metal that tore into the swarm creatures. The noise was deafening. The creatures fell, but more kept coming. They climbed over the bodies of their dead without hesitation. Private Bora fought next to veterans who had twice her experience. When her rifle stopped working, overheated from continuous fire, she pulled out her pistol and kept shooting. She did not retreat. She did not panic. She just kept fighting. The Marines formed a wall of bodies and weapons. The swarm creatures were deadly and fast, but they could not break through. For every Marine that fell, 2 more stepped forward. The humans simply refused to give ground. After 3 hours of continuous battle, something changed. The swarm ships began pulling back, disengaging from the human fleet. The creatures inside the Indomitable suddenly stopped attacking and tried to flee. The Marines hunted them down. Jiwon looked at the tactical display in disbelief. The swarm was retreating. They had lost over 40% of their ships. The human fleet had taken terrible damage too. 10 ships were destroyed and many more were badly hurt. But they had won. She found Admiral Hyunwoo on the bridge, looking tired but satisfied. "You won," she said, still unable to believe it. Hyunwoo shook his head. "We survived the first fight. That is not the same as winning. The real battle is still ahead." The victory at Cassian gave the galaxy hope, but it also revealed a terrible truth. The swarm was not just a fleet. It was an entire civilization with a home base somewhere in unexplored space. As long as that nest existed, the swarm would keep growing, keep spawning new ships and organisms. They would keep coming back forever. The Galactic Council held an emergency meeting. They wanted to establish a defensive line, to have the human fleet protect the border while civilian populations evacuated deeper into safe space. It was a reasonable plan. It was the safe plan, but Admiral Hyunwoo had a different idea. "We find the nest," he told the council representatives through a communication link. "We go there and destroy it completely." The council chamber erupted in shocked voices. Ambassador Velthara spoke for many when she said, "Admiral, that would be suicide. You would have to fly deep into their territory, surrounded by millions of their organisms. Your fleet would be destroyed before you even reach the nest." Hyunwoo's face on the screen was calm and determined. When you live on a death world, you learn something important. The best way to defend yourself is to attack first and attack hard. We are going after the nest. You can help us by giving us the information we need to find it, or we will search for it ourselves. But we are going. The council had no choice. They agreed to help. The Quellan scientist Tormus joined the human fleet with all the data they had collected on swarm movements. He worked with Lieutenant Commander Jaehee, a human tactical analyst, to study the patterns. Where did the swarm ships come from? What direction did they travel when they retreated? After 3 weeks of work, they found it. The nest was located in a dark nebula, a cloud of gas and dust so thick that normal sensors could not see through it. It was the perfect hiding place. The human fleet set course for the nebula, knowing they were flying into a trap. When they entered the nebula, everything became difficult. "I cannot see anything," Lieutenant Taeyang complained as his fighter squadron moved through the thick gas. "My sensors are useless. I can only see maybe 20 meters in front of me." The fleet moved slowly and carefully through the darkness. Then they found what they were looking for, and everyone fell silent. At the center of the nebula was a system with no star. Instead, there was a massive organic structure, something that looked like a giant insect hive built in space. It was hundreds of kilometers across, pulsing with its own light. Thousands of swarm ships orbited around it in patterns too complex to count. "How do we fight that?" Commander Junho asked, his voice filled with doubt for the first time. Captain Soyeon pulled up the tactical plan they had been developing. "We do not fight it, we kill it." "Colonel Yoonji, are your Marines ready?" Yoonji had been preparing for this moment for weeks. Her Marines were loaded into heavily armored dropships, ready for the most dangerous mission imaginable. They would fly directly to the nest, land on it, get inside, and plant nuclear fusion charges at critical points that Tormus had identified. Then they would try to escape before the charges exploded. "We are ready," Yoonji confirmed. "We have even painted our armor, old Earth tradition for warriors going into battle." The dropships had been decorated with red and white patterns, ancient symbols that human warriors had used thousands of years ago. It was a ritual, something to give the Marines courage. They were about to fly into hell, and they wanted to look like warriors when they did it. The fleet began its attack. Every human ship opened fire at once, launching missiles and firing railguns at the swarm vessels. The enemy responded immediately, and space filled with weapons fire. The human ships pushed forward, taking terrible damage but refusing to stop. Under the cover of this massive battle, the dropships launched. Lieutenant Taeyang and his squadron escorted them, fighting off swarm organisms that tried to intercept. Taeyang's fighter took hit after hit, alarms screaming in his cockpit, but he kept flying. "Keep those dropships safe," he shouted to his squadron. "Whatever happens, they have to get through." Sergeant Daehyun manned a gun mounted on his dropship's side door. He fired continuously as space creatures swarmed around them. His gun barrel glowed red from the heat, but he did not stop. Swarm organisms crashed into the ship's armor, trying to claw their way inside. He shot them off one by one. The dropships crashed through the nest's outer membrane like bullets through skin. Inside was a nightmare. Organic tunnels stretched in every direction, pulsing with light and movement. The Marines deployed quickly, securing the landing area. "Plant the charges and move," Yoonji ordered. "We have 30 minutes before this whole place explodes." The Marines split into teams and moved deeper into the nest. They encountered swarm organisms at every turn, creatures specifically designed to defend this place. The fighting was brutal and close range. In the narrow tunnels, there was no room for tactics or strategy. It was just humans and aliens killing each other face to face. Private Bora got separated from her unit when a tunnel collapsed behind her. She found herself alone in a chamber filled with eggs or cocoons, hundreds of them. Her mission was clear: plant the fusion charge and get out. Her hands shook as she set the timer. Behind her, something moved in the shadows. She did not look back. She just activated the charge and ran. The teams planted 12 fusion charges at key structural points throughout the nest. But the cost was terrible. Marines fell defending their teammates. Sergeant Dae-hyun died holding a corridor so his squad could escape. Other soldiers sacrificed themselves to buy time to complete the mission. Their names would be remembered on Earth forever. Colonel Eunji led the survivors back to the landing zone. They were exhausted, wounded, running low on ammunition, but they had done it. All teams get to the dropships. Move, move, move. The dropships launched just as the timers reached 0. 12 fusion charges detonated simultaneously deep inside the nest. The structure convulsed, internal explosions spreading like fire through dry wood. The nest began tearing itself apart from the inside. The swarm ships went crazy. They lost their coordination, flying in random directions, crashing into each other. The hive mind that controlled them was dying, and they were dying with it. The human fleet pressed forward, destroying everything in range. The nest collapsed in on itself, a massive implosion that created a brief flash of light in the dark nebula. When the light faded, the nest was gone. Millions of swarm organisms died in seconds. The remaining bioships drifted aimlessly, no longer controlled by any intelligence. Target destroyed, Commander Junho reported. His voice was quiet, heavy with the weight of what they had just done and what it had cost. Admiral Hyunwoo looked at the tactical display showing all the human ships that would never return home. Send a message to the Council. The swarm is finished. The nest is destroyed. We are coming home. The journey home took 3 months. The human fleet was broken and battered. More than a third of their ships were destroyed or too damaged to make the trip. The surviving vessels limped back toward the core worlds carrying the wounded and the dead. But they were returning as heroes. Station Harmony prepared for their arrival like nothing the galaxy had ever seen before. Every species sent representatives. When Admiral Hyunwoo's shuttle docked at the station, he stepped out to find thousands of aliens waiting. Kriltans, Korvans, Tessians, Quellans, and dozens of other species filled the massive docking bay. Ambassador Velthara approached him first. Her crystal body glowed brighter than ever, pulsing with colors that meant joy and gratitude in her species. Admiral, the Council wishes to thank you. Your people saved us all. You saved our entire civilization. We can never repay this debt. Hyunwoo looked older now, tired in a way that sleep could not fix. His mechanical arm hung at his side, damaged in the final battle. We did what was necessary. Any species would have done the same. But Velthara shook her head. No, Admiral. We asked you because we were desperate. We expected you to try and fail. Instead, you succeeded where everyone else failed. You faced impossible odds and refused to surrender. That is something special. That is something the galaxy will never forget. In the weeks after the battle, military academies across the galaxy studied what the humans had done. Commander Junho wrote a detailed report explaining their tactics, their strategy, their way of thinking about warfare. It became required reading for every military officer in the Council forces. The lessons were clear. Humans succeeded because they planned for failure. They built ships that could keep fighting even when damaged. They trained soldiers who would not panic when things went wrong. They fought at close range where their weapons worked best. And most importantly, they simply refused to accept defeat. When any other species would have retreated or surrendered, humans kept fighting. Colonel Eunji attended memorial services for the Marines who died in the nest. There were so many services, so many names. Private Bora attended with her, now promoted to corporal for her bravery. The young woman's eyes looked older than they should, haunted by memories of what she had seen inside that nightmare place. Will it always be like this? Bora asked quietly. Will humans always be the ones who have to fight the impossible battles? Eunji thought carefully before answering. Maybe. We come from Earth, a planet that tried to kill us every day. We learned to fight before we learned anything else. Other species had easier lives, gentler worlds. That does not make them weak. It just makes them different. But when the galaxy needs someone to do the impossible, yes, they will probably call us, because we are the ones who do not know how to quit. The Galactic Council held long debates about humanity's future role. Some species wanted to make Earth the official military protector of the Council. Others worried about giving too much power to a species that was so good at violence. The arguments would continue for years. There were no easy answers. But something fundamental had changed in how the galaxy saw humans. Lieutenant Taiyang landed his damaged fighter for the last time and went home to his family on Earth. His father asked him what the other species thought of humans now. Taeyang remembered the pilots from other species who had joined the human fleet for the final battle. He thought about Ambassador Jiwon, who had stayed with them even when she could have gone somewhere safe. He thought about all the aliens who had come to Station Harmony to thank them. They used to think we were dangerous, he said. They were afraid of us because we came from a death world. Now they know we are dangerous, but they also know we are friends. We fought for them. We died for them. I think that is what we always wanted, to be accepted as part of the galactic community. Across Earth and its colonies, young people started joining the military in record numbers. They had grown up hearing stories about how hard life was on Earth, how humans had struggled to survive. Now they wanted to be part of something bigger. They wanted to go to the stars and make a difference. Admiral Hyunwoo retired 8 months after the campaign. His body was too damaged, had been pushed too far. At his retirement ceremony, representatives from 43 different species came to honor him. Captain Soyeon was promoted to admiral and took command of the fleet. In her first speech as fleet commander, Soyeon said something that every species would remember. Humanity earned its place in this galaxy not by conquering anyone, but by protecting everyone. Yes, we are Deathworlders. Yes, we are good at fighting. But that is not what defines us. What defines us is that we understand how precious life is. Because we had to fight so hard to survive on our own world, we will defend our allies. We will protect those who cannot protect themselves. And to anyone who threatens the peace we died to create, remember this. Remember what happened when you made the Deathworlders angry. The speech was broadcast across the entire galaxy. Every species heard it. Some felt grateful, some felt afraid, but all of them felt respect. Humanity had proven itself not just as warriors, but as protectors. Ambassador Velthara watched the speech from her chambers on Station Harmony. The Rilton Combine was safe. The galaxy was safe, all because they had been desperate enough to ask the humans for help. She thought about the human concept of hope, that strange idea that things could get better even when everything looked impossible. It was very human, and maybe, she thought, the galaxy needed more of that kind of thinking. Far away on Earth in a small city, a little girl named Hana looked up at the night sky. She was only 8 years old, too young to understand war or sacrifice or the cost of victory. She only knew that humans had gone to the stars and done something amazing. She dreamed that one day she would join the fleet too, that she would fly among the stars and explore the galaxy. Her parents smiled as they watched her dream. They knew the truth about war, about the price of being the galaxy's protectors. But they also knew that humanity had found its purpose. They had reached for the stars and discovered they were needed. The galaxy had learned an important lesson from the war. When you evolve in hell, you learn to fight like you have nothing to lose. But humans had taught an even more important lesson. They had shown that survivors of hell do not become monsters. They become guardians. They become protectors. They become the ones who stand between the innocent and the darkness. The age of the Deathworlders had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.